Okay, let me get this full screen here. So we're going to do a repeat of last week where you're going to explore some teaching models. I decided to limit, originally I was going to have you read from there was 5 possibilities, but I think the last possibility is really a little more advanced and probably more appropriate for college teachers. But so the topics that you're going to look at, we're going to look at these teaching models: jigsaw, role playing, inquiry-based learning, and synaptics. And you're going to do the same thing as last week, where you're going to figure out one that you want to read the chapter about and do some reflection on it. So the first teaching method is the jigsaw teaching method. And this is a method that is extremely popular. This is a model of teaching that is extremely popular for teachers to consider. And it's a cooperative learning experience that really promotes both social and intellectual development of your students. And in such a case, your students form an expert groups where they refine their skills, maybe learn something that the rest of the group doesn't know, get some background knowledge, whatever it might be. And those expert groups, they work together to prepare to divide and move into what we call their home groups, so that they can share their information with students. And the home groups, then, every student in the home group has been in a different expert group. So they come to the home groups and they, through a very student-centered approach, they share their learning in a student-centered, student-driven process. So that at the end of such a jigsaw experience, the teacher then concludes by debriefing and engaging the students in a full class discussion where they can kind of start to draw out and draw across the groups information that was learned. So that's the jigsaw approach, jigsaw model of teaching. Role playing is another model. This is a really good one to consider for social emotional learning. It focuses on social problem solving and it allows students to really think about interpersonal problems and kind of explore the different responses and different ways that they might respond to some of these problems. The teacher's job in such a model is to really refine for the students, establish the problem, define it with the students, make sure that you've given them different characters and settings so they can really take this abstract idea and make it very concrete. While students are presenting their different responses in their role playing, the teacher might stop the role playing, debrief with the students, invite other people in to consider an alternative response, and really kind of challenge. The students are in a role playing, they're constantly thinking and they're thinking on their feet in such an approach. The text also talks about inquiry-based learning, which is I have a picture here of the flasks because it really is rooted in the science education. Inquiry learning in English looks a little bit different. You know, it might guide in the language arts or in history, it might guide the students to look for specific type of information. But inquiry learning in science and math is really problem-based and it's discovery learning, where the teacher has to develop a question or a situation that is worthy of inquiry. So it's very important. You know, these things have to be something that is worth the students investing in the time, and so they have to be complex. Students have to see these things as complex. So one of my best examples is a video that I show for my students where it's a group of 4th graders who are designing a tiny house, and they literally work within a restriction of square footage, and they talk about what has to be you know, what are the essential elements of a house? You know, what do you need? You have to have a kitchen, you have to have a bathroom, you have to have a shower, you probably need some storage. And so they do that, and then they use that to try to develop the best possible tiny house that they can. And there's a video on the teaching channel. It's just amazing to see these little 4th graders just, you know, really kind of taking that task, because it's the challenge of the task that really, you know, they meet with architects, and they look at blueprints and all of that, and it really to them, I think it's the complexity of the task that really challenges them and excites them into that task. So in such a model of teaching, the students then, or the teachers, develop that question or that that problem, that task that needs to be addressed, and the students then explore the concepts, design an experiment, communicate their results. So the students are constantly, they're engaging in the students, they're engaging in a really, really strong personal cognitive process. It should be noted that inquiry-based learning is probably one of the hardest types of teaching to do well. In Hattie that we talked about earlier, Hattie, it scores very, very low. But one of the reasons that he says that it scores so low is because of his belief that it's really not done well by a lot of teachers. So he, even in his meta-analysis of inquiry-based learning, really is not dismissive of the concept so much as talking about the need to really develop teachers who are able to engage in inquiry learning in meaningful ways in their classroom. The next process teaching model that we looked at would be called synectics. And I have here a picture of the Monopoly board because it's a very playful way of thinking about it. If you think about, standardized testing, IQ testing is often used analogies. Blank is to blank as blank is to blank. So lakes are to rivers as maybe vehicles are to cars, right? That I'm sure I think going very fast, but it's that idea of being able to think about things, thinking about problems on these two different sides and in comparison to one another. And so synectics focuses students by really helping them to develop this creative thinking process. And it uses a lot of analogical thinking. So a teacher that's using this has to really do some stretching exercises to make sure that the students are prepared to think in analogy. They need to be prepared to think about the problem at hand. The teacher has to do a good job of describing the problem or the condition. The students use analogies to consider the concepts that they're learning, and then they explore the implications of those analogies. And through the use of analogies, they really are thinking deeply about the content or the concept that's being introduced to them. And this is also often used to help build students' metacognition, because when they're talking about their analogies, they might they're starting to think about why they think of things as being in relation to each other, or how they think that something is similar to something different, something very different from that concept. And so these are metacognitive tasks, getting them to become more aware of their thinking about their thinking. Okay, so your job this week is similar to last week. You're going to pick one of these 4 models that you just learned about. You're going to read the corresponding chapter from Models of Teaching, write your 2-page response, and in your 2-page response, you're going to respond to one of the case studies in the chapter. What did you notice? Why did it matter? Create a paragraph summary. Develop your 3 questions about the model and its use in a classroom or coaching setting, and then explain why this model was something that interested you. Then you're going to go on to the discussion board and kind of report out very broadly something about the teaching model that you explored and learned more about. Next week, we'll begin your own inquiry process, where you're going to start to design an inquiry into a topic that is of interest to you. I'll see you next week.